his video, so you can go check that out if you'd like to see it, where basically I tried to boil down to him to explain to him that you do not know what my worldview is, and he eventually had to admit that he had me wrong. He was trying to project that I would have an objective morality, which I don't. I don't think that morals are objective. Morals are another way of saying what is good and what is bad, and good and bad are relative. Relative topics cannot be objective. They just can't. So everything about that idea was wrong for me.
Alright, so KingHeathen, at this point there was a very important misunderstanding. The fact that the words good and bad are relative terms does not mean that an objective standard of morality cannot exist. In the same way that the words high and low used for numbers doesn't mean that an objective system of numbers cannot exist. When we call 1 a low number and 50 a high number, we're using the words low and high in a relative way, because we could then call 50 a low number and 537 a high number. Obviously, the terms being used are relative. However, that doesn't mean that the numbers themselves, that the system of numbers itself, is relative. We still have an objective system of numbers. The same way, the fact that the words good and bad are being used for moral judgments does not mean that morality itself is relative. And whether you realize it or not, KingHeathen, you actually do agree that morality is objective and not relative. Is this something that I'm just projecting onto you? Well, no, because you make arguments like this.
I ask you, do you find killing innocent fetuses, pregnant women, due to the actions of their husbands, fathers, ancestors, do you think that is good? Do you think that's good? Would you do that? And if you would not, and if you find it immoral, then your God is your moral inferior. How can he be God if he is your moral inferior? If you think it is wrong to punish someone for someone else's crimes, but he doesn't, even if you excuse him because, well, he's creator, he can do what he wants. Sorry, that makes him morally bankrupt. That's the whole point. That's the part you missed.
I'm sorry, KingHeathen, but you're actually the one who's missing the point here. How you or anybody else who watched your video cannot see how inconsistent you're being, it just amazes me. You were just presupposing an objective standard of morality in your entire argument that you just made. You know, you were talking about how all these things that the God of the Bible does are just so immoral. You know, and you said that that I would be unjustified in trying to say, well, that that he can do what he wants because he's the creator. And you know, you're asking me if I think these things are immoral, as if I'm supposed to think that they are immoral. But how can you do this if you reject objective morality? If morality is relative and simply dependent upon how someone subjectively feels, how can you talk to me as if I'm supposed to think that these things are immoral? This becomes even more clear when you say that my God is my moral inferior. How can he be my moral inferior unless we are appealing to an objective standard? He may be my moral inferior according to your subjective standard, but who's to say that your subjective standard means anything? What if your subjective standard says some... Wait, what? Man, my script is all messed up. What if my subjective standard says something else? Again, you don't actually believe this. You don't actually think that morality is subjective, because you constantly appeal to it as if it is objective in so many of your arguments. So anyways, that's the main point that I wanted to get across in regard to this whole issue of morality. But I also didn't want to ignore your questions. So, do I think that these things that you described are immoral? These things in the Bible? You know, if it's a human doing it to another human, then yes, most definitely, it is absolutely immoral. And I know that you anticipated how I'm going to respond, but the truth is, if God is real, if God does exist and he is their creator, then how can you possibly say that he is responsible to them? Can he not do with his creation as he wants if he does exist? How can you say that him doing these things are immoral? Immoral according to who?
Part where it's talking about the city, it's talking about, wait, I'm sorry, the city? It's not talking about heaven? No, it's talking about 21 verse 10. He carried me away in the Spirit and to a...
Alright, so I actually don't have a script for this next part just because I really don't think it's needed. It's pretty simple. So what we have here with this whole issue about the new earth being discussed in Revelation, you are basically right. You're right technically. But it really is just an understandable misunderstanding. When Christians who are somewhat educated talk about living with God in heaven forever, they are referring to this new earth that's being discussed in Revelation 21. In the first few verses of this chapter, it talks about how God's people will live with Him on this new earth forever. So, when I'm talking about heaven, about the future heaven where that will last forever, I'm talking about this new earth. But yes, technically you are right. Revelation 21 is talking about the new earth. Yes.
Earth. Now, there is a very important reason why it has to be the New Jerusalem on earth, because if it is heaven, then heaven is material. Are you saying that you support that idea?
KingHeathen, yes, I actually do believe that that heaven, or the new earth, will be physical. Where I'm going to live forever will be a physical place. The fact that you seem so surprised by this, and in fact Jesus as an argument against me, against Christianity, really just shows how ignorant of Christian theology you actually are. I mean, sure, there are tons of Christians, sure, I'll totally admit that. There are tons of uneducated Christians who think that we're just going to be floating around in some, weird cloudy place just playing harps or something. But that's not what the Bible teaches. That's not what educated Christians throughout history have taught. That's just not the case. If you just pick up any systematic theology, for example, here I have this right here, Wayne Grudem, systematic theology. This is like the standard evangelical systematic theology. He is very clear about the fact that he believes that Christians will live forever on a physical new earth with physical resurrected bodies. Randy Alcorn, he is a pretty well-known Christian theologian. He is associated with John Piper and C.J. Mahaney, so he is considered to be a respected evangelical theologian, Bible teacher. He wrote a book called Heaven, in which he also is very clear about the fact that we will have these physical bodies and live in a physical place. So this isn't anything that surprises anybody who knows anything about their Bible. This is what Christians believe. Again, at least educated Christians, at least semi-educated Christians. Also, if you look in 1 Corinthians 15, it's very clear that this physical resurrection of our bodies is essential. It says that if we're not raised, then Christ is not raised, and if Christ is not raised, then our faith is in vain. So, obviously, that's what we believe. Anyways, that is going to conclude this response. Thank you very much for responding, KingHeathen. Just real quick here, I just want to kind of say that I know that you have tons of subscribers, so you're probably more concerned with entertaining people, that you're more concerned with rhetoric than actual substance. But in the future, please, at least if you're talking with me, please try to make more of an effort to actually deal with the issues, to understand what I'm saying, and to kind of, remember what you said in your own video. Even though, obviously I know that there's going to be misunderstandings. That's just a part of us being human. I am sure that I misunderstood you, at least at some little point. It just happens, but if we could at least make more of an effort to try to understand each other, that would be great. And a little bit less on the rhetoric. Thanks very much. Thanks for watching this, everyone. And KingHeathen, I will look forward to your response.
Don't take my word for it. Think for yourselves.